Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Yes, indeed, continuing our focus on what we need to do to get things right. Dr. Austin Tam-George joins us next. He's the Executive Director, Institute of Communication Studies in Lagos. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Mr. Adetikumbabayan did identify communication as one thing that we're lacking in governance, and we need to correct a lot of impression in governance. Who knows what is being done in state to federation, he says. And so, speaking about communication, what have you noticed so far across board?
You see, I think we need to have a clear understanding on how communication works, especially in leadership positions. There seems to be a temptation to look at communication only in terms of press releases and manifestos and what spokesmen and women of government say. But I think that communication, especially in positions of leadership, function in a different way. Once you're in a position of leadership, communication takes a completely different spin, because what you do, your action, is much more important to people than simply what you say. Because if you, for instance, have a credibility problem, you say one thing and people say something else, people are seeing something else, people are not able to navigate the tension between what you're saying and what they see. And so once you're in a position of leadership, of course, people will always communicate public policy and the rest of it, but more importantly, what people are looking out for is exactly what you do. And they don't want to see a major disconnect between what you say and what you appear to do. So I think that what is most important in leadership positions is how you lead by example. The force of your action is as much communication than simply what you say and what the position papers say about your administration.
You know, many will say that this is not the first country where we will see spin, sound bites, and all of this kind of strategy to communicate messages to the people via the media. We also see it here. So what's the key difference between what we see elsewhere and here?
Well, there is a fundamental difference between public relations, for instance, or public communication, and spin. Public relations or public communication deals basically with facts that the people can easily verify. What this means is that even if the facts are not comfortable, the practitioner or the person who is speaking on behalf of government in this case will be frank and open and honest enough to say, look, although we said this, in reality, this is what we are facing. And so we know that there is a problem between what we said and what we're experiencing now. They own up. They acknowledge that in human activities there will be problems, and so they have the integrity, they have the honesty of purpose to own up when there is a disjuncture between what may have been promised and what the people are seeing. But the difference with spin is that it is based on false information, it is based on propaganda, it is based on a motivation to mislead. And so the consequence of spin, and those who perpetrate it, they call them spin doctors, okay? The consequence of spin is that once people discover the truth, you lose credibility, and they begin to see your communication with a great deal of skepticism. And you know, once there's credibility in leadership, whatever you do, whatever you say, people tend to look at it with suspicion.
How does that help in governance, knowing full well that most politicians employ the services of spin doctors during elections, especially for those who have some awful stories or image issues to contend with? How do they understand that, look, this is governance and the campaigns are over? Because it would seem as if some of them still continue with the services of the spin doctors, even when in governance.
If politicians hire the services of spin doctors, that will be a discredit. They should hire the services of communication consultants or public communication experts or policy communication experts, not spin doctors. It is not a good thing to be designated as a spin doctor. A spin doctor necessarily deceives people. So there's a fundamental distinction between spin and accurate information. So what they should be hiring are not spin doctors, communication consultants.
No one would want to say, I'm a spin doctor. They all come in the guise. They all come in the guise of, I'm a communication expert, I'm a communication consultant, knowing full well that underneath is the duty to, you know, spin for this client.
Put a spin on it.
So,
Another word is it lie?
Yes, you know, the spin is characterized by half-truths and deliberate falsehoods. You see, all of these things can win momentary sympathy or support from those who hear you or those who read out your public material. But the larger consequence of it is that once people discover that there is a problem with the facts you're putting out, with the information you're putting out, then you lose credibility. And the consequence, of course, is that even when you tell the truth, people tend to look at what you say with a great deal of skepticism. In political practice in Nigeria, for instance, especially during the last campaign, we've seen specific promises. I'm talking about specific promises made in town hall meetings, during campaign stops, from city to city, from community to community. And the people had very clear ideas about what the PDP wanted to do in the name of continuity and what the APC said they were going to do in the name of change. Some of these public promises were eventually documented as policy statements. Okay, and so when the election got over, when the campaigns were over, and an administration had been formed, what the people wanted to see were no longer a lot of these campaign promises, because now you are in government, and so what they expect is a direct relationship between the promise made during the campaigns, the promises on the basis of which the government was elected, and what they want to see in terms of what actions the government in place now takes, you know, in terms of affecting the material conditions of the people. And so once there's a disjuncture between a party's promises, a party's manifestos, and what the government appears to be doing while in office, it builds a great deal of credibility problem for the government. And that is why I suspect there is this problem about, is the APC a ruling party, or is it still in opposition? I suspect that Nigerians think that that transition hasn't quite crystallized. Are they still in opposition? Because the rhetoric that we are seeing in the media, it seems to be that, you know, the APC still appears to be in campaign mode.
Sorry, Chamberlain, the awareness of the people is very key here. When you talk about town hall meetings,
yes.
You recall that now we have a bulk percentage of Nigerians who take down notes.
Yes.
When you go for meetings, they take down notes in long hand. They put everything down. And when you come back, pretty much later to tell them that that's not what you said or you promised, it would seem as if the person who had taken down the note was in a state of trance at that point in time.
Yeah.
So at what point can the people remind this same political leaders in government, irrespective of where they are, that you made this promise and we hold you to actualizing some of these promises?
Yeah.
Because for them, promises are meant to be kept.
Yes. Well, these are not, in fact, at the level of political leadership, these are not just mere promises. These promises take the quality of government policies. For instance, if you say you want to build infrastructure, it comes under the policy of infrastructural development. And there is a whole ministry, the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, that deals, or sometimes Ministry of Works, that deals with these kind of issues. So once you make that transition from being a party in campaign mode to a party now in government, the people are no longer interested in the campaigns that happened. They are now interested in how those promises will find concrete manifestation in terms of changing the material conditions of the people in the country. And so what we are looking at, in fact, seems to be some kind of lethargy on the part of those who are in government, not just at the federal level, by the way, across the states, because sometimes we tend to forget that the country is not just about the federal government. All the 170 million people in this country are disaggregated in the 36 states of this country. And so we need to focus on not just what is happening at the center, but also what is happening at state levels. What I suspect Nigerians want to see at this time, 100 days into the life of this administration, is what can the government do on a sector-by-sector basis. I say sector-by-sector basis because, you know, it is at the level of sectors, you begin to see how government policy crystallizes. For instance, the government says, at the center says it wants to fight corruption. If this is the case, how does that relate to tackling the crisis we all know exists in the education sector? How does that, in fact, affect the creation of the 5 million jobs that we say, that you said you wanted to create during the campaign? So fighting corruption is a good thing. But then what about education? What about transport? What about, we still have one of the worst infrastructure deficits in Africa.
A lot on the bucket list.
Yes, so, you know, it is at the level of appointing cabinet ministers that you begin to focus on how to achieve policy focus. For instance, if you say you want to address the kind of problems we have in education, the Ministry of Education will deal with those issues. And the ministry will be headed by a political appointee, the Minister for Education, in most cases an expert. So you need to deal with these things on a sector-by-sector basis. And if the cabinet hasn't been formed, as we are seeing now, you know, almost across the country, especially at the federal level, what the sense you get is that the administration itself hasn't taken off, because you need to know how the lives of people will be affected on a sector-by-sector basis.